Good evening and welcome to the special meeting of the Bellingham City Council. We are discussing the comprehensive plan tonight. We're going to have a public hearing. And let's start with roll call because we have no special announcements for this evening.
April Barker. Dan Hamill.
Here.
Jean Knudsen.
Here.
Michael Lillequist.
Here.
Roxanne Murphy.
Here.
Pinky Vargas.
Here.
Terry Borneman.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we only have one item in front of us this evening. It is our public hearing for the comprehensive plan. Again, this is an update. Even though we are receiving comments this evening, we will be open to receiving written comments until October 20th. So if there's anything that occurs to you this evening and you want to follow up with that, please do send us written comment until October 20th, and that will all be compiled. We are going to start with a presentation from our staff, and I'm going to hand it over to Rick Sepler. What's that? Oh, you know what? Hold on, let's just one moment. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance, even though it's not required. I think we should. Yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Good evening. Lisa Poole, Senior Planner with the Bellingham Planning Department. So as you noted, tonight is the last public hearing for the comprehensive plan update, and I just want to give you a few brief slides to tell you what tonight's public hearing is for. The public hearing tonight provides an opportunity for the public to comment on City Council's recommended changes in the September 28th version of the draft comprehensive plan. It also provides comment for additional minor revisions that have been brought forward since publication of that draft plan. And I'll talk about those minor revisions in just a moment. The latest version, dated September 28th, includes City Council's recommendations that were discussed over a series of work sessions from May 16th through September 26th. And those are noted in red, underlines, and strike-throughs in the draft plan. It also includes additional staff edits to grammar and spelling, but those are not substantive changes. I wanted to note that Planning Commission's recommendations are not noted in red in that draft plan unless Council made changes to those recommendations. So these minor revisions that have been brought forward since the release of the draft plan, we'll be discussing those in next Monday's Committee of the Whole work session on the comp plan update. So I won't go into them in great detail, but we'll have more time to discuss those next Monday. There were some staff changes to the capital facilities chapter, and this includes an updated capital improvement plan that's consistent with the proposed biennial city budget, and that's in attachment 4 of tonight's packet. We've also got additional language regarding capital facilities planning, and that's also in tonight's packet. There's one additional staff change to the economic development chapter that's not in the packet, and this is related to Galbraith Mountain, and we'll talk about that again next Monday. But this policy is needed to support some discussions that are occurring right now on how to preserve this as a regional destination. Council brought forward a change to the capital facilities chapter on October 10th, and this is staff's draft language that we'll discuss next Monday. There were also several changes to the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. And those are noted as comments 75 through 94 in the Pro Plan comment tracker. And the Pro Plan changes were actually preliminarily approved by Council on October 10th. Public comments. As of September 28th, the public comment tracker included 197 comments, and we've received more since then. Tonight's packet includes a comment tracker with comments number 147 through 197 and staff's responses to all of those comments. The prior comments were responded to in a tracker that you received on August 29th. All public comments and comment trackers are available on the Comp Plan Update webpage, which is listed there. And as Councilwoman Vargas stated, the deadline for written public comment is October 20th at 5 p.m. A few key dates coming up. Once again, that deadline for written public comment on the update. And then next Monday, October 24th, at the Committee of the Whole, staff will be summarizing and responding to public comments from tonight's public hearing. City Council will consider all comments received to date, discuss any new issues raised tonight or through written testimony, and direct staff to respond as necessary. City Council will also provide direction on the minor revisions that I just discussed that occurred since the 928 draft. And if appropriate, Council will direct staff to bring forward an ordinance adopting the comp plan on November 7th. So stated there, on November 7th is potential adoption of the plan, although of course Council can add additional work sessions to further discuss if needed. So with that, that concludes staff's presentations. Are there any comments or questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We're going to move into the public comment portion of this evening, which you're all here for. I just want to remind everybody we have a lot of people here today, which is really great to see this many people engaged. And we want to provide a safe, fair environment for all the speakers. So just as a reminder, no jeering, no clapping. And we have a lot of people to get through this evening, so we are going to adhere very closely to our 3-minute rule. At 2 minutes and 30 seconds, you will hear a little ding, so you'll get a 30-second warning to let you know that your time is wrapping up. We do have one presentation this evening, and this is, just so you are aware, Council has done this in the past, where 5 speakers or an organization decides to surrender their time and have one person represent them as a group. So, we have done this.
It doesn't represent citizens.
This is not a conversation. Well,
There is no public noticing of this.
Wasn't necessary.
He's not even from town. He's out of town and paid consultants.
This gentleman will be presenting and representing 3 different organizations. He will be representing the Whatcom Real Estate Association, the BWA.
Why do for-profit enterprises get more representation than citizens?
If we do that, we could have put ours together and had other people refer theirs.
Okay, so this is not a
I
communication.
spent a lot of time
This-
trying to get mine down.
You're correct, Pinky. This has not been a communication. This has not been communicated. This is not acceptable.
You can roll your eyes, people.
Wait a minute, hold it, time out, folks. Number one, this whole thing started, I want to remember to the whole audience and everybody, and people know this, this whole thing started when I was asked by the realtors, the BIA, and several other people when this was going to be sent through the planning committee. We were going to do this through the planning committee, and I accepted the fact that this person could come and speak to the planning committee. I did that. She didn't do it. I did it. That's where this all started. Number one. Number two, if this person is going to speak about expanding our boundaries, ain't going to happen. We've already decided that. This majority of this council said we're not expanding our boundaries. And I have to admit, this has been done in the past. We have given up time to people. I remember a few months ago or a year ago, we gave a group of people that lived in Edgemore 15 minutes to give their time. Now, I am not objecting to the fact that if the York neighborhood wants to present something, that's fine. Maybe this isn't going to be the same hearing. Maybe we'll have another hearing. But let us not yell and scream. We need decorum. I have sat in that chair 6 different times, and the abuse she has taken has got to stop. It's got to stop, folks. And I'm not trying to take sides here. I'm just telling you, you got to quit beating up on our council president. I don't need a lecture from you either, sir. This is a council chamber. It's not a lynch mob. Listen. I tried, folks. Well, I've happened to have a little bit of knowledge of this city because I've been here my whole life, and I have the best interests of this city in my heart. And people don't come here and yell and scream at our body of government like that. Yes. Well, who's in charge? I'm not in charge to do that. Obviously, we're taking a recess.
And one person is unprecedented.
We're going to take a slight recess just so everybody can calm down, folks. I do understand that your concerns and things, but we're just going to take a few minutes to let things calm down. And
the incidents that you referred to as what we spoke, they each spoke in 5 different people in 3 minutes each. We've never seen this before with a paid consultant being given special privileges before the council.
Well, but if they failed, if we find out that they failed to follow the rules. There's no legal requirement to notice the rules. Legal requirement to notice. I'm saying legally. They have the rules. They have a legal requirement. You have a legal requirement to follow the rules. I'm saying we have a legal requirement to notice something. I think it would just keep it moving. Well, do that as well.
Okay, let's all take a deep breath and try and do this again. I want to respect that everybody came here tonight, and we want to get through this public hearing tonight, and we want to give everybody an opportunity to talk. And so if we can please just follow through in respecting each other's time and decorum, and realize that we want to get through it as much as possible, okay? So let's try and just one at a time, go through public comment and respect the office that we are all here to uphold. So if I can ask that of you, we can move forward. And if we could just follow the rules of you speak when you're up at the podium, not from the audience. And we're going to uphold that if someone is disruptive, that we will ask you to leave. So I don't want to ask anybody to leave. I want to have everybody have an opportunity to say what you came here to say. So let's all just work together and give everybody that opportunity. So for those of you who are surprised because we have a presentation by other people foregoing their time, I apologize if I surprised you. This presentation was scheduled months ago, but some people felt that it was unfair at the time, so we did move it here to the public hearing. So just for those of you, I appreciate that you might be surprised, and I understand that. I apologize if it caused anybody any issues, but I'm just doing something we have done before. Larry Horowitz did a presentation last year that was exactly the same as this, that he represented it for 5 people and had 15 minutes. So this is not that this has not been done before. I apologize if it was a surprise to you. It wasn't something that we actually had to announce. So I'd love for all of us to work together and have a very engaging evening and have an opportunity to everyone to have our chance to speak. So if we're all good with that, let's move forward and try and get through this evening. And we are going to start with the presentation by Michael Louise. It will be 15 minutes. He, again, is taking 5 minutes people's, he is taking 5 people's spots.
Could you name the 5 people so we make sure they don't get up and speak?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
So the 3 organizations are Whatcom Realtors Association. Roger, I forgot what organization. Okay, Roger, what organization are you from? Citizens Alliance. Okay, so Roger, Byron Jones from BIAE, Elliot from BIA, Terry from BIA, and Perry Estrick from Whatcom Association of Realtors. So yes, I have 5 people who have surrendered their time.
I just want to say that I respectfully object to this. We had no notification on this. The first I learned about this was on the dais tonight. So I understand your position, but I respectfully object.
Okay, I totally understand that. Just note that when Larry Horowitz did his presentation, we had no advance notice either. Michael, you ready?
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate the time, and I hope what I have to say tonight is helpful for everybody in the community. I've been paying attention to growth management stuff since it began in the late 1980s, and one of the things, you know, that we have to remember is this has been going on for 25 years. We've had 3 development cycles. We've had 3 economic cycles. We've had 29 counties and 225 cities working at this. I think there's a lot of lessons out there, and I want to try to talk a little bit about some of those lessons that I've seen having been around this. I've been particularly focused for about the last 20 years on affordable housing, or housing affordability, and the impact that planning has on the affordability of housing. I think the first lesson, and it's a sobering one for those of us who are promoting a lot of ideas, is just the difficulty that governments have in influencing actual outcomes. It's really easy for governments to stop things, tell you what you can't do. It's very difficult for governments to make the alternative happen. And I think that's a challenge for everybody it's again, very easy to say you can't build over here, but to try to get the alternative going over here is something that governments can't do alone, and it has to be a partnership. And the places that succeeded has been a really strong partnership between government planning and people who build things to build the alternative. So I think that's really an important lesson for everyone. There are a few things about growth here, and this is all in this report, which you've gotten, and I hope is online somewhere so everybody can see it. Whatcom County is growing very fast. It's one of the fastest growing counties in the state, and no reason to really believe that it will be growing any slower, primarily due to migration. So this chart shows migration, net migration into the state, and natural growth. The blue bars, this is by 5-year increments, going back to 1960. The blue bars are natural growth. That's births minus deaths. The red bars are net migration. That's people moving in minus people moving out. And as you can see, the net migration has been very strong in this county for the last 25 years. More recently, it's way down, and that was a national phenomenon. People just stopped moving all over the country. It started to pick back up again. You can see it from various data. So I think Whatcom County can look forward to a lot of people moving here. There's no question about that. Whatcom County is also very balanced in terms of age, and I think there's some discussion, and we heard a lot about Bellingham and Whatcom County as being this great retirement community. I'm sure it is, but it doesn't really show up in the data. The age cohorts in Whatcom County are very much the same as around the state. So you'll just focus on the first 2 bars. That's Washington State on the far left, sort of under 24 if you can't read it, or yeah, under 24, 25 to 45. 45 to 65, and 65 and older is the yellow at the top. And that's Washington and Whatcom County, and they're almost identical. So I think that in terms of demand for housing, it's going to be really balanced across the board. Another important thing about Whatcom County is it is somewhat lower wage than a lot of other places. It doesn't have the high wages that you see down in central Puget Sound. So these are average wage per job. And you see Whatcom County is fairly low down, and it's not because, I mean, the real reason there is the lack of high wages sort of upper end that just simply doesn't exist here in as great a number as you'd find other places. The middle is exactly the same as the state, sort of the middle of the bell curve of wages. But in Whatcom County, you don't have the big chunk of upper end, which can then afford very expensive housing. So it's very much of a middle income kind of place. one of the things I want to talk about and really emphasize, when growth management first came around, I think there was an implicit understanding that in the future more people would live in multifamily housing and fewer people in single-family housing. And I think the philosophy behind growth management of having a lot more density really kind of requires that. And in fact, that has not happened. Really at all. What this chart shows is the housing types. So the blue is single family, the orange is multifamily, and the gray is mobile homes. And in pairs here between 1990 and 2014. So you have 24 years of experience, and you look at Whatcom County-wide, which is the two on the left, and there's barely been any movement at all. And the increase in multifamily really is at the expense of mobile homes. Mobile homes just haven't been expanding, and so there's more multifamily, but the demand for single family is pretty much unchanged. The second two in the middle there is Bellingham, and you see some drop in the proportion of the housing stock is in single family within Bellingham, and a lot more multifamily, somewhat less mobile homes. Then you go to the two on the far right, and that's sort of the opposite. You're picking up single family in the rest of the county, and that makes up for that. So overall, again, very little change. This pattern is repeated everywhere in the state that I've looked at. All of central Puget Sound, the same pattern is happening. A lot of other counties, the persistence of demand for single family is just not changing. And there's no particular reason it should. I mean, we haven't done anything to change it. People aren't any different. Their preferences aren't any different. The desire to people to live in a detached house is a very deeply embedded thing in the culture, and you don't just sort of change that by passing a law. And I think that's something that maybe wasn't realized when the law was put in place, was that was going to be a really tough lift to get any kind of shift in the demand for single-family housing. And I'll talk in a second about some part of that. One of the things that's often talked about is the baby boomers and millennials. There was this sort of conventional wisdom that baby boomers would retire and move out of their big houses in the distant suburbs into multifamily. There's no evidence in any data that that's happening. And it would be happening by now. The boomers are turning 70. If they were moving, they'd be moving by now, and there's just no evidence that that's happening. And in fact, the evidence is very strong that the preference of baby boomers is to age in place, stay in that big house as long as they possibly can. The millennials, it's a little bit of a different story. The assumption there was that millennials have sort of rediscovered urban living and want to live in apartments, and there's some truth in that. The challenge is a couple of things. One, it doesn't scale very well. I mean, the millennials are 20% of the population. They can't all live in close-in urban settings. There's just too many people. It's very expensive, and we all know that those people are not earning as much money as we'd like. And ultimately, it's because they are also delaying having families. And when they get around to having families, everything indicates that there will be just as much demand for single-family housing among the millennials as any other generation. So that's all in another paper I wrote, which I'd be happy to send you. But I just don't think there's any reason to believe that I've seen that there will be this kind of shift into more multifamily. That's just a pretty deeply embedded thing. Not very many people are aware that this is even an objective. And I talk to everybody, and I bug everybody about how they live and where they want to live and why they live where they live. And people are pretty firm in what they want, and they're not going to move into an apartment because a plan says they're supposed to. It's just not happening. And I feel bad because I pushed for a lot of that stuff for a lot of years, and you sort of hit this wall of, no, that's not really the way I want to live. I'm retired, and I like being exactly where I am. So I heard a lot of that. Lesson number 3 has to do with land and the availability and buildability of land really drives a lot of things. This is a very complex subject, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing, and there's a whole lot of stuff in the paper. The one thing I do want to talk about a little bit, because I did a lot of work on it some years ago on capacity analysis and the buildable lands process that went on in the buildable lands counties and the capacity analysis here. It was treated, when the law was put in place about buildable lands, as kind of a technical exercise. You'd sort of, you pull your GIS data and you tweak it a little bit and press the button and poof, there's your land capacity. It turns out it's a highly subjective process. There's a lot of judgment that goes into it. in terms of what land is actually buildable, what builders will want to build, what builders will find an attractive business proposition for them, what they won't. Highly, highly subjective process. And I think to be successful, it's a necessary process, and to be successful, I think, really requires a kind of partnership with the industry to figure out what actually is buildable. I'm going to be doing a project over in Spokane County where we're going to attempt just that. They've never done a buildable land analysis, and we're going to be starting with, sort of everybody at the table to let's talk about how we take that raw data out of the GIS system and how we adjust it to get a really realistic picture of what can be built. So I would suggest that that's something that's really worth doing, is just sit down and go through that process in a very open way to try to figure out what is buildable, because the subjectivity isn't just about what's a critical area or what's an economically viable thing. It's also, there's the political question. Infill is difficult. And do people really want to undertake those? Land may be theoretically available, but if you're in for the fight of your life, that's maybe not something you want to do as a builder. So there's a lot of things that go into that process that I think are worth paying attention to, because you really need to do it. You can't go outside the urban growth line. You got to know what you have inside and what's really going to work for the industry, because they're the ones that have to build it. A second point about land supply that has not been factored into anybody's calculation is speculative demand. And that is, the demand for land for housing is typically thought of as, well, how many houses do we need to build? There's a whole bunch of people out there who simply invest in land to hold on to it and make a lot of money. And growth management, by definition, creates scarcity. That's what it does. When you limit the amount of something that's a desirable commodity like buildable land, that becomes very attractive to investors. And because that it's the only land available, you hold on to it, the price is going to keep going up. And that's something that has happened all over the place. And there's no answer to it. It's just that it's a phenomenon that has to be factored in when you figure out how much land is going to be available to build on. That some people will just simply hold on to it, and that's their prerogative. You can't force them to do anything. A fourth lesson has to do with urban villages, and I know there's a lot of interest in Whatcom County and in the plan in urban villages. And I spent a lot of time looking at this back in the 90s when they were sort of first bubbled up. And I think the thing that wasn't well understood, because almost every city I ever went to, they would give you their comp plan, and there was always these lovely illustrations done by a planning firm of what the urban village would look like. And there's the 5-story, 5/1 underground parking, walkable streets. It's lovely. The problem is that's an extremely expensive style of development, very expensive. And once you go to underground parking, and we'd love to get rid of cars, very difficult to finance a building without parking. So you got to have parking, and when you go to underground parking, the price of everything just goes up. And that becomes a very expensive kind of development. I was formerly on a city council, one of my council colleagues builds that sort of thing in Bellevue. Now it's a high-end market. And I said, well, what kind of rents do you get put on your pro forma for that? And he said, we have to put down about $250 a square foot per month. So you do that, that's $2,500 a month for a 1,000 square foot apartment. That's what their pro forma says they have to get. Rents in Bellingham, when I looked it up, were about half that, maybe $1.25 a foot, maybe more, but it's a long way from $250 a foot. If you sort of back off, if you want to build, somebody wants to build something, they go to their banker, and their banker says, well, what are the rents? And they say, well, here are the rents. And they say, well, those rents won't support that construction cost. I won't loan you money to build it. And that's what happens typically. And so the sort of urban village vision of these, sort of stacked flat buildings with underground parking requires, very high rents and very expensive land. And I'm not sure that either of those are something you particularly want to have. So I just simply say be cautious about that. Of all of the urban village visions that I've seen, only a very small number of them have actually come to fruition in the last 25 years. And so that's something just to be cautious about and sort of do the homework on to see if the economics of it are really viable in the markets you have here. So those are my thoughts. I hope that's been helpful, and I really appreciate the time, and I really appreciate you working with my client to present this time. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, we are going to start with our sign-up list for public hearing. And I'm going to read the first 3 names. And if you could, just line up here to get ready. So David Nelson, Butch Kramer, and Mary Kay Robinson. And if I don't pronounce your name right, please do correct it when you come to the podium. Forgive me, I'm reading off this sheet. Go ahead, David.
Okay. Thank you. David Nelson. I live on Chuckanut Mountain. I'm a professor of economics at Western, and I'm a property owner in Bellingham. And I'd like to just begin by thanking the consul and the planning department and the city for the huge amount of effort that you're putting in to do this plan and for listening to all of us tonight. Thank you. My comments are specifically related toward some thoughts I have about meeting Bellingham's future housing needs, specifically as it relates to single-family housing. In the draft plan, there are 3 densities for residential. The lowest density says residential low density, defined as 7,201 or more square feet per dwelling unit, which is 5 or less units per acre. I would propose that that be modified to say 7,201 to 10,000 square feet per dwelling unit, which would be 4 to 5 units per acre. It's my thought that any lower density than this squanders the limited available developable land and raises the cost per lot of providing new home sites. And if we take a citywide approach in making this change, it doesn't single out any neighborhood for what the neighborhood itself may perceive as unfair or undesirable. It also encourages greater density in those parts of the city that are low density without increasing density in neighborhoods like York and Seaholm that have small lot sizes and have already contributed much to absorbing growth in the city. The ultimate number of homes, of course, that can be built are still going to be limited by factors such as the buildable area, taking into account environmental considerations. My second recommendation is to allow the infill toolkit to be used in areas of the city zoned for single family. This allows for a variety of housing types to better meet the diverse needs of Bellingham residents and allows for the opportunity for our neighborhoods to become more diverse. 1/2 of the households in Bellingham are non-family. 1/3 of households in Bellingham are people living alone. Citywide adoption of the infill toolkit increases the likelihood that a property can be developed to its approved density while still allowing for the protection of critical areas. My third proposal is that for newly established plats, allow for the construction of detached accessory dwelling units. For these plats, the objection of changing the rules would not be an issue, since it would be clear to all parties on move-in to the plat that this is part of the covenants of the community. Allowing for accessory dwelling units can make more diverse housing types available for people with moderate housing needs who do not want to live in an apartment or condo, and allow the homeowner with an ADU the opportunity to spread the high cost of home ownership out over a second dwelling. This also provides greater diversity in Bellingham neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Butch Kramer, Mary Kay Robinson, and then Kim, I think it's Owen, maybe?
Thank you, Council. My name is Butch Quam, and it's a tough one, Pinky.
Thank you.
So, Scandinavian. Anyway, I live in 8769 Clubhouse Point Drive in Blaine. We moved from our starter home 2 years ago, which we lived in for 47 years. I'm a Whatcom County person. Haven't ever lived in Bellingham. I've done a lot of business in Bellingham with the food processing business and ag-related businesses for most of my life. And I'm speaking on behalf of Whatcom County when I talk about urban sprawl and this comprehensive plan. It was 26 years ago when the Growth Management Act was passed. Back in 1990, the legislation passed it, and they had similar problems at that time they were trying to address. As Pinky's letter inside Bellingham was pointing out where are these people going to live, and that's your challenge and how they're going to do it. I support the changes made and suggested by David Nelson, and as far as the other issues that we have to look at is the urban sprawl. Besides the urban sprawl is the affordability of the housing, the land supply, the housing demand, and the housing supply. It's basic economics 101, and coping with the fact that we are going to have growth. And they like Bellingham, they're going to come, and we got to be efficient, and we got some talented staff people that can solve these problems and professionals in that field. And we all have our preferences, but I would listen to the professionals in that field of land use planning and go with their thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Butch. Mary Kay, and then after Kim, it's Judith Green.
Good evening. Mary Kay Robinson, the president of the Whatcom County Association of Realtors. I'm testifying today not because I believe I'm going to change anyone's mind about how they vote, but purely to create a record. There's been volumes of written and oral testimony submitted by housing, land use, real estate professionals, and detailed research and statistics provided to council. We have shown errors in land use analysis that does not include appropriate allowances for buffers, steep slopes, wetlands, pipelines, thus drastically affecting density numbers. This was demonstrated with the Dewey Valley annexation. We've yet to see from staff a thorough housing analysis of what we have, which begs the question, how do we plan for the future when we don't know what we have to start? The emphasis on urban villages makes the numbers work for planning purposes, but from a financial standpoint, as we just heard, they just don't pencil out for renters or for the purchasers of those units. To heavily rely on urban villages for long-range planning is folly. The council has already announced they're not going to admit more land supply by expanding the UGAs or admit that there's a deficit of deferred infrastructure costs of $130 million that the city is obligated by law to address. Nor is there any mention of how to deal with that $130 million in the current comp plan draft. And if the 2006 plan was so great, why is housing gotten worse, and why are there no more urban villages besides Fairhaven and the Barclay? The Association of Realtors Government Affairs Director, Perry Eskridge, will be submitting written testimony one more time to create a record and standing. I don't know how many more headlines we need to read about the affordable housing crisis in our community for us to take specific action. A few subsidized housing units are not going to address the huge issue we have with affordable housing. There are not enough subsidies to accommodate all who want affordable housing. The GMA requires that we provide affordable housing for all economic segments, which includes middle income, beginning teachers, secretaries, new police officers, government clerks, et cetera, et cetera. They won't qualify for subsidized housing. They need middle income housing where they work, not in far-flung communities with long commutes. This is an equality issue. I see it as a social justice issue. Your decision decides whether we have diversity and vibrancy in our community or whether we become a pretty enclave for the wealthy with a requisite smattering of subsidized housing in segregated areas.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Kim, Judith, and Eric Scott.
Good evening and thank you. My name is Kim Owen and I live in the York neighborhood, and I'm speaking on behalf of the York Neighborhood Association Board, of which I am a member. We urge you to support housing for Bellingham's working class families and protect the integrity of single family zoning that makes our city livable, healthy, and family centered. We are a neighborhood of homeowners, renters, retirees, students, families, and single adults. I have 4 points to summarize from our letter to the board. We need enforcement of zoning codes. As policy H15 of Housing Chapter states, Bellingham supports equal access to housing for all persons. To accomplish this, the council must empower the city staff to enforce zoning codes so we can return to fair and equal access for working families who have been pushed out of our neighborhood by high prices. Enforcement will end the de facto upzone of homes turned into expensive illegal rooming houses and cash cows for the rental industry, outside investors, and moneyed interests. Very few families can afford to rent in York anymore because of these zoning violations that have priced them out. And our once single-family zone neighborhood is now 54% rentals. We want families to once again be able to buy or rent homes in our inner city neighborhoods. We want our children to grow up and be able to afford a home in their own town, and we want our neighborhood back. We want it back out of the hands of absentee landlords who violate single zoning by cramming 5, 6, or 7 renters into a 3-bedroom, single-family zoned home, creating poor conditions for these tenants and their neighbors to deal with. One real estate family owns 31 homes in York's single-family zone sub-area, and we believe that through investigation, many of these properties will be shown to have been converted to illegal rooming houses. Number 2, retain the owner occupancy requirement for accessory dwelling units, ADUs, in single-family zone neighborhoods. Number 3, issue a moratorium on new ADUs until an inventory of what already exists is completed. And number 4, embrace empirically supported knowledge that protecting supported family zones with enforcement is critical to providing the ultimate opportunity for middle to low and fixed income persons and families to be able to afford to purchase or rent such homes close to their family wage jobs. Thank you. Before I leave, I just want to add one thing that is not part of the official letter. This is just myself speaking now. Now, since the precedent has been set, that time may be given, I anticipate that neighborhoods throughout the city will want to take full advantage of this opportunity, and I'm wondering how we should contact you if we should wish to do that. It may not be the appropriate time, but it would be good for you to share that information publicly.
We'll get back to you, Kim. Okay. Judith, then Eric, and then Jeff Craney.
Good evening. My name is Judith Green. I live in the Sunnyland neighborhood, north of Alabama. It's designated as single-family medium density. I'm concerned that the language excuse me, in the comp plan under H18 calls for allowing detached ADUs in single-family neighborhoods, among other infill development. Putting detached ADUs in single-family neighborhood is in fact changing the zoning. It was also decided by a vote of the City Council that the toolkit housing forms would only be used in multifamily neighborhoods. They have now been applied in single-family neighborhoods, and instead of changing the zoning, the parameters of single-family zoning have been adjusted to fit the toolkit forms. Basically, that says that single-family zoning should be ignored. People want to own homes in single-family neighborhoods. So where's the wisdom in changing zoning so that there will be even less affordable single-family housing stock? Remove H18 from the comp plan. I'm going to be sending you some photos of people in my neighborhood who want single-family zoning. I thought I could put it on a USB and show it here, but I will send them to you individually. The city needs to do a comprehensive study of existing ADUs to assess the true density of a neighborhood. I will also send you some photographs that I've taken in my neighborhood of ADUs. All I've done is drive through the alleys, and I think that enforcing code is the job of the city. It's not my job, and it's something that needs to be done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Eric, then Jeff, then Linda Twitchell.
Hello, Eric Scott, Birchwood neighborhood. First, Larry Horowitz and 4 others spoke, all 3 minutes each. They didn't have to combine, weren't able to combine that in 15 minutes. And they were all city residents. They were not an out-of-town paid consultant. In fact, that consultant didn't even tell us where he was from. Also, a 32 to 35% growth rate in the next 20 years is very high, allowing developers to build for that. By the end of the century, it'll be about 300,000 people in the city at that continued growth rate. That'll be a very bad place to live. Next, ADUs and the main house owner occupancy requirement. Real estate investors want the requirement removed and to allow detached ADUs. The justification for this is race equity, and more vaguely, inclusion. As of now, elected officials or real estate investors may convert part of their own home to an attached ADU and invite a family of color to live there. But when I hear them call to remove the requirement, to me, it is clear they themselves do not want to live near a family of color, that they would like to collect rent from both units as an investment duplex, but live far away. At a recent forum hosted by the York neighborhood, 3 to 4 people spoke with passion to remove that requirement and change zoning in general for race equity. We then learned that at least 2 of those were real estate investors, each with several properties. Another was a young woman of color, maybe 19, that read from a laptop and lambasted our zoning as racist. To me, her comments were well scripted and obvious she had been coached on key phrases and terms to use. Lost my place. But when she mentioned the neighborhoods like York were wealthy, it was clear to me she had no idea what she was talking about, unless she meant the wealthy real estate property rental investors. And yes, they probably are wealthy. My knowledge, 54% are rental in the York neighborhood. The financial elite would like to turn our working class and poor neighborhoods into their real estate investment commodities. Race baiting, instigating and harnessing racial contention by America's elite. It's not new, but has been recently come to Bellingham by people with much to gain politically and financially. It's a tactic to shield oneself politically and distract people from the real problems, overpopulation and an economy with less and less need for workers in general. Policy H20, inclusionary zoning program. I don't know who put that in at the last minute, but it sounds like intentionally vague political speak. A Trojan horse for major upzoning. This needs to be removed. If anything, it needs to be very specific, such as inclusionary zoning in areas like Silver Beach, which right now are very exclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Jeff Cramey, Linda Twitchell, and Ann Mackey.
Good evening, Council. That's Jeff Quam, and it's a tough one. And 1651 Kelly Road, Bellingham. The first speaker that came here this evening, Mike, I learned a little bit. I want to address that 24 and under tab that you had that is here in Bellingham. My daughter was going to speak tonight, but she got a little nervous. So I'm going to just tell you a quick little story. My perspective and overall awareness of Bellingham's current housing needs and those factors contributing to it may be a little bit broader than most due to my everyday involvement in the real estate world. However, the most impactful perspective that I'm gaining comes directly from my daughter's experience here in Bellingham. And her story is just one of so many out there that are trying to find a place to live here in Bellingham. So let me just, a real quick story. My daughter is in her early 20s. She learned her trade as a hairstylist here in Bellingham and has been for the past several years building up her clientele and working in North Bellingham business. Her husband has recently, today, been sworn in as a Mount Vernon police officer. For the past several years, they've been living in an apartment in Linden, and but they want to move closer to his work, but she wants to retain her residence here in Bellingham for several reasons. One, it's close to her business, and 2, because of family for both of them. However, and they also want to live in a single-family home. So over the years, they've been saving money so they can buy that starter home. And but their look on Zillow, which she does every day, is disappointing. She cannot find a place. It's their affordability's not there, and the supply's not there. So their backup plan is a search for multifamily here in Bellingham, and they're finding that very difficult as well, very high priced. So. So there are a couple factors, and I think Professor David Nelson brought up 2 of those which need to be employed. and to address the supply and affordability. One is the density here in Bellingham has to be increased. You're working within the city of Bellingham, so that caveat that the density should be between 4 to 5 units per acre is one, and the availability of builders to be able to use the infill toolkit. You got to be able to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Linda Twitchell, Ann Mackey, and Jean Hamilton.
Hi, Linda Twitchell with the Building Industry Association. In your opening hearing on the comp plan last spring, you heard more than 1.5 hours of testimony about housing problems in Bellingham. We are concerned that in the comp plan deliberations since then, City Council has not had one serious discussion about this city's housing crisis and how to deal with it. We do not have enough affordable, buildable land in this city to meet current needs, let alone future needs. As a direct result, land costs have risen and housing inventory is now extremely tight, leading to prices that exclude much of the middle class, let alone low-income folks, from buying homes. You've received ample testimony about flaws in the land capacity analysis, how it overstates densities in many areas and fails to note that much of our remaining residential land will be very expensive to develop because of critical area concerns, yet Council hasn't addressed these problems. Please note, this plan does not include the GMA-required inventory and analysis of current housing types and needs. How can we adequately plan for the future if we don't first address the existing problems? The city has allowed its lack of capital facilities, planning, and financing to affect decisions on land needed to accommodate future growth. But the capital facilities element of the plan does not address the existing deficiencies that were noted as a reason for not extending the UGA. We need plans for capital infrastructure in areas that are already zoned for urban densities. Does this plan show internal consistency between land use and capital facilities plans? Does it show GMA-required level of service standards? The Bellingham Urban Fringe Plan, sub-area plan, has not been updated with the county as required. Are Bellingham's neighborhood plans and your comp plan draft compatible? Is the comp plan in full conformance with the countywide planning policies and all elements of the Whatcom County comp plan that was adopted 2 months ago? Both of these things are required. And has the city enabled urban development in areas designated for urban growth during the last 20-year planning horizon? This is required. Are areas that have urban characteristics and are contiguous to the city excluded from the urban growth area? Thank you for your attention to this.
Ann Mackey, Jean Hamilton, and then Tim Hostetler.
Ann Mackey, I live in the York neighborhood. I recommend deletion of policy H18 in the housing chapter. A proposed amendment to policy H18 crosses out the reference to the chat group and replaces it with the name of a group called Cities Community Solutions Work Group on Affordable Housing. When I asked the council staff person, Marie Marchand, for a copy of that solutions work group membership list, she sent me the chat membership list. I asked for minutes and recommendations from that. She sent me the chat group. So I don't know, and I wonder if the council members know what you're voting on here and who this Community Solutions Work Group on Affordable Housing is and what they actually recommended. Were any neighborhood representatives included in this group? They certainly weren't included in the chat group, and that was one of the objections coming from the community to have that removed. But really, the meat of the issue is in the 4 different bullet points that are listed. It's the content that's of concern. Number 1 bullet says inclusion of detached ADUs, small lot and cottage housing in single family zones. This is actually a proposed reversal of the council's previous decision on the toolkit not being allowed in single family zones. So if you leave this in, this H18, you're really undoing that policy established by the council previously. Bullet number 2 says reduction of impact fees to build ADUs. Now that's an invitation and an incentive to build more of these. Other discussions during the comp plan have taken a lot of time to talk about incentives for construction, but we are obviously just slipping this one in with no discussion. That concerns me. The third bullet talks about reduced parking requirements for these ADUs, and here, what's the implication of the neighborhoods that are already suffering from a massive parking overload from the illegal rooming houses that we already have? And the fourth bullet says other code changes and incentives are recommended. Well, what do these mean? Other code changes, that's a real red flag to me, and I'm concerned about what that means. So why do these same controversial elements keep coming up in the comp plan, even when you change the name from the chat group to this other new city group? I think it's because there's an effort to actually put the infill toolkit housing units into single-family zones. And I think if that's the intent, to rezone single-family neighborhoods, then you should just come right out and say that, defend it, and have an open forum about that. I want to respond quickly to the realtor who said that his daughter and son-in-law are unable to find fixer-upper starter homes. Well, just turn around and ask your realtor friends if they could possibly put some of the homes that they're hoarding and have put into their portfolios, put those on the market for your family to buy. Thank you.
Jean Hamilton, Tim Hosletter, and Michael, oh no, Michael, you've already gone. Kelly Hamilton. Ooh, oh boy, I'm that person.
Good evening. My name is Jean Hamilton. I live at 814 Mason Street. I'm the secretary of the Seahome Board, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. Kim from York neighborhood gave my talk a lot better than I could, but all I want to do is talk a little bit about what the ADUs do to a neighborhood. Seahome, like York and Sunnyland and so on, has always been a working person's neighborhood. It's not, no rich people have ever lived there that I know of. And it's a very solid neighborhood. It's the neighborhood that will pass your school bonds and your park bonds, and they're very active. They're what make Bellingham the kind of place that you want to live with your family. And we realize that because we're close to the university, about half of our housing is rental, and we welcome the students. We're glad to have them as neighbors. But when you add ADUs, when somebody buys up a house, puts in 2 or 3 extra bedrooms, adds an ADU in the back, and for some reason that gets permitted, or if it doesn't, then nobody does anything about it. What you have is too many cars parking on the street, too much garbage, too many parties, and we are glad to have the renters with us, but it takes a certain percentage of homeowners, long-term homeowners, to give a neighborhood the quality that makes it, helps make Bellingham what you want it to be. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
My name is Tim Hostetler. I live at 201 North 34th Street. I am on the Seahome Board. I am presenting comments for the board. Our written comments are in your packet. Interesting planning process. I'll start with that. It started with a real concern of Seahome were the accessory dwelling units. And there was a task force that was put together by the executive branch. It was wonderful. Went on for 3-4 months and then stopped in the spring. I believe one of the reasons for stopping it was the rental licensing, which is to try to do it. Evidently the mayor says no. Whatever the case was, and in no longer continuing, that was a missing piece in this process. The basic comments from the neighborhood is for accessory dwelling units, do 3 things. Look at the administration, implement it, and enforce it. Neither or none of those three things are being done right now. The record of the city says that Seahome has 2 ADUs within its total neighborhood area. We have walked it, and in only the single-family residential zoning district of Seahome, there are 28, and I think we're probably low on that. Quite a difference between 2 and 28. All we want is the existing code to be implemented and enforced. Let's start there, and then we can go to some planning at a different time. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I have Kelly. I'll let you pronounce your own last name, Kelly. And then Justin Hecht and Bill Geyer is next.
Hi, I'm Kelly Hanlon. It's probably my writing. I live in the city limits, and I feel very blessed to live in the city limits. I moved up here 18 years ago, and we were fortunate that property was affordable at that time, and we were able to purchase property, and the costs to build were nominal enough to be able to build because we live on an income that would be considered normal for Bellingham. Certainly, we're not doctors or or anything. And anyway, I don't know how we could afford a home in Bellingham if we had to move here right now. It's painful to see friends and family and people I know who want to buy here and can't. And I'm not standing here with any answers for you. All I'm asking is that you look in your heart to really understand the grasp of what's going on in Bellingham and just review the policies. I have a friend who has an expanding family, and they want to buy a little bigger house, and they're trying to put in contingent offers because they're so afraid that if they sell their house, they're not going to have a house to move into, or it's not going to be, they're going to turn around and it's not going to be affordable anymore. There's just so many facets. You buy a piece of property, someone was going to buy a piece of property, and they found out that the costs were going to be $80,000 on top of the property just to be able to break ground. I don't think people truly understand what everything adds up to, and I'm glad that wasn't the case when we were able to move here and build because, again, we couldn't do it, and we love Bellingham. We would love our 3 boys to be able to come back here and live and possibly build or move in here at some point. My parents had to sell because their property was just getting too big, and they were all of a sudden sort of panicked that they weren't going to be able to buy another house that they felt comfortable living in, that was sort of what they were used to. They wanted something where they could live on one level, and they really struggled, and they've actually had to supplement a little bit to be able to do that. So anyway, thank you so much for your time and just listening to me as a citizen of Bellingham. I love it here, and I know other people want to be here too. And we're not trying to, everybody come here, but just the people who are already here and the kids who are already here who just think this is a really great place to live. And I hear everybody, and although people seem like they're like this, I think everybody really shares the same common, same common theme in their lives. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Justin, Bill Geyer, then Harry Ellison.
All righty then. All right. So I am actually a student representative for a club at WWU called Students for the Salish Sea. And I would actually like to thank you guys for your concern for the environment. Which is actually kind of a bit of a funny word because for the longest time we've used environment as some abstract entity to either abuse or isolate. But I think as we move along, we start to realize that it's actually something that's all around us and inside us. And it's beautiful, I think we can all agree. And that sometimes in our speed to advance and improve, we don't really just stop to realize the damage that we're inherently doing to ourselves when we harm the environment. But by implementing some of the policies that you have written, and I believe these are on page 19 that I'm specifically referring to, that you have in fact shown that we as a people can see that there is meaning around us and inside the beauty that is in nature. And I also like to give a shout out to, I believe it was Dan Hamill, who changed some of the wording for, about improvements and trying to face environmental problems from just Bellingham Bay to the Salish Sea. And I hope that as we move forward implementing these policies that, and look to the health of our home and the Salish Sea, that other towns will start looking for us as inspirations, as models and stewards. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Justin. Bill Geyer, Harry Allison, and then Louise Bjornson.
Good evening, council members. For the record, Bill Geyer, 1008 16th Street. And as many of you know, I'm certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners with a 40-year career in planning, 25 the past years as a planning consultant and local residential builder, and just trying to help raise my grandkids here in Bellingham. So kids, go to bed. It's late. You're past your bedtime right now. It's 8:30. But housing opportunities, as we know, are created when the housing supply is increased. And it gives consumers more choices. It gives leading to stabilized prices, and which leads to a more affordable market rate housing. And the comp plan density policies have a major impact on this. It impacts affordability directly. Our draft plan, the staff has identified that our current density is approximately 6.5 units per acre when you average all the multifamily and single-family zones across the city. However, that average is skewed high because of the high multifamily rates of 12 to 20 units per acre. So when you focus back to the single-family zones, it's a much lower rate, and as the comp plan points out, 42% of the acreage in Bellingham is single-family zoned. And a leading factor to some of those lower densities are you have 16 areas in Bellingham that are designated for only 2 units per acre. And this is a vestige from zoning that was established in 1969. These large lots are costly. There's wide swaths of Bellingham that are not available to various demographic groups in Bellingham. And the policies can be changed. And you have actually a very good policy in H2 and H25, where you've talked about more equitable demographic distribution around the city. And the land that's available now really should be adjusted so that these 2 units per acre locations, or as you call them, the RS 20,000, should be adjusted to open up opportunities for the rest of the community. I testified to this at the Planning Commission. Staff commented in the Track It response that did not feel that the RS 20,000 locations need to be rezoned because you have sufficient capacity in other areas. But it still avoids this main issue I'm raising of affordability and availability for a broad swath of the Bellingham population. Your policy LU1 gives you the basis to make this change. So I have 2 recommendations tonight. Policy LU3, where it does have the description for the lower density range, I would encourage what was heard earlier this evening, set it from a 7,200 square foot to a 10,000 square foot range, okay? The 20,000 is antiquated. And secondly, an important point, and I agree with Ann Mackey and others today talking about the impacts of student housing, particularly LU8, I would recommend that your off-campus housing be designated as a permitted use only in residential multiple zones and prospectively 3,600 density or greater. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Harry Allison, Louise Bjornson, and then Izzy Laval.
Yes, my first recommendation would be to get rid of your buzzer. It's loud. I also would like to echo the comments by the York and the Seaholm neighborhood. I think a little passion is a good thing. I also think that a detached ADU proposal is less about affordable housing than it is about people making a buck. In long-standing family neighborhoods, sacrifices such as you're proposing here go to the direct quality of living and the property values, so that someone just can engage in a commercial venture. It doesn't seem to balance out to me. So my point would be no attached ADUs, a provision for off-street parking be mandatory, and a ADU must be owner-occupied. That would be my comments. Thank you.
What was his last name?
Harry Allison. Thank you, Harry. Louise Bjornson, Izzy Laval, and then Bill Henshaw, maybe. Louise.
Thank you. When I was on the City Council, I voted for the ADU ordinance after much public input. We voted for attached ADUs. They are more environmentally sound with shared walls. They preserve green space, garden space, play area, and more sunny areas, and they fit into the neighborhood with the least impact. We voted against detached ADUs in single-family neighborhoods again and again and again. They are not as environmentally sound with no shared walls, less sun, more shade, unusable space, and more impact to the neighbors. Less play area, less garden area. And once that soil is paved over, it's gone forever. The detached ADUs change the character of the established neighborhoods. The Bellingham Comp Plan says to retain the character of the neighborhoods. In 1995, Senate Bill 5567, with the title Providing for the Preservation of Single-Family Neighborhoods, made the specific addition to the Growth Management Act. And I quote, "The comprehensive plan must include a housing element that ensures the vitality and character of established residential neighborhoods." They were afraid of this kind of thing of pushing more development in the neighborhoods. Whether you're a homeowner or a renter, when you move into an established zone single-family neighborhood, you expect one house per lot. You have a right to expect that because that's a single-family zone. Adding even a few detached ADU changes the character of the neighborhood, especially if you happen to be the unlucky person with one built next to you. However, some neighborhoods have covenants to protect people from that kind of impact, so it only happened to the older, unprotected neighborhoods. When the toolkit was first proposed, it was only to be in new neighborhoods, so when people moved to those areas, they would know what to expect. There's a much more open process with predictability. I live in the Birchwood neighborhood, which is the lowest income neighborhood in the city. The school is 67% free and reduced lunches. We have over 5,000 people, lots of apartments, and not our share of parks, and now we don't have a grocery store. The Birchwood is the historic Victory Garden neighborhood, laid out with long lots, historically provided food during tough times, during and after wartime, during the Depression, and now with our lost grocery store. Areas with good garden space need to be preserved for the future. Please don't take away our opportunity to grow our food. I request that in the comp plan that you have only attached ADUs and only owner-occupied ADUs. And then housing chapter, page 7, H18, should be eliminated. Nobody knows what it is. People don't know who that group is or what they did. Population forecasts do not necessitate upzones, so why push for detached ADUs? It is essentially an upzone. Older neighborhoods have value. Please treat them as such. Thank you. And
Thank
I have
you,
a
Louise.
handout.
Okay. As a reminder, when you come to the podium, if you could please state your name for the record before you speak.
I'm sorry, I'm Louise Bjornson,
No, you
Birchwood.
did, Louise. You're fine. I have Izzy and the Bill Henshaw, and then Michael Lillemartin? Will Martin, maybe? Okay. Come on up, Izzy.
Hi, I'm Izzy LaValle. I would like to thank you all. Really just thank you a lot from the deepest swell in my being that you included the Salish Sea bioregional ecosystem in your comprehensive plan. I would like to thank you on behalf of the students for the Salish Sea, as it is our home and the home to so many people. And in that appreciation, I would like to extend an awareness that I have the privilege to stand here and to voice this articulation. I have the privilege to have my voice heard and have the time off to speak right now, which many individuals don't. Even the ability to access the information about this meeting is a privilege. And in that privilege, there are many individuals who were not able to attend, who probably have many things to say regarding the comprehensive plan. And that brings me a great deal of responsibility to articulate for the Salish Sea, for the resources that are being contaminated, for the water quality that's being contaminated by a number of pollutant sources, as somebody who's studying the sciences and water quality and biodiversity. And that is something that needs to be remediated, healed. And I'm just really grateful that you included the Salish Sea, not just the bay, because you have that beautiful awareness of watersheds, of how our decisions impact something far bigger than ourselves, how our privilege is a responsibility to that which is greater. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, Izzy. Bill Henshaw, Michael Martin, and Alex Feeler.
I'm Bill Henshaw. I live at 2653 North Park Drive in Bellingham. And I'd like to expand a little bit on what Michael Lewis said about the urban villages. My experience has been 56 years as a real estate broker, and I'm not representing the realtors tonight. I'm speaking on my own. But I've also had extensive experience in lending and mortgage finance. Since the financial crisis, there is no financing for condominiums other than two-story. And there is one lender in Bellingham, Washington Federal, that will lend and put these into their own portfolio. There is nobody else that will do a condominium project, and we have to be looking at ownership, not just multifamily housing, because the multifamily housing is already pricing most people out of the market. So I think the staff needs to do a little bit more work on just how that's going to play out, because at the present time, we're missing a key component of what's going to go into the urban villages, and without it, they're going to be a disaster. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Michael, and then Alex.
Hello, my name is Michael Martin. I live in the St. Clair neighborhood. I just wanted to come about 6 months ago. I was speaking with April about the idea of parkour parks in Bellingham. I just want to keep this on your guys' mind as something to take very seriously. In the language, we talk about things like equity, diversity, inclusivity, engagement, those kind of things. Many people are not aware of what parkour is to begin with. This is understandable. From the outside, people see people jumping around, climbing, all of those things. That is exactly what it is. However, it goes much deeper than that. I've been a coach for a total of about 6 years now. I've trained my entire life. The things that are most important in the parkour community are things like inclusivity, things like self-awareness, things like hospitality and a welcoming environment. We can push numbers around all day and talk about zones and things I'm totally ignorant of, to be totally real with you here. But as far as things that actually help the community with alternative play and spaces designated for that, putting parks in areas, especially low income or high income, whatever, it doesn't matter, because the point is you're there to move, you're there to learn. Doing this, anyone from any background with any amount of money can walk up and begin. You don't need shoes, you don't need a skateboard, you don't need a racket, you don't need any money to start. You just need to have energy. A lot of our youth have that in Bellingham, and there are many outlets for it. However, I think this is the most prominent in a sense that it is the most open to everyone. And I think it could be used as a great catalyst for people from different neighborhoods, from different zones, from different housing areas, to meet each other, to play with each other, to learn about each other, and to learn about themselves. The two most important things that I teach my kids when I coach, I ask them what it is, and they tell me it is safety and it is strength. So when you give kids the tools to think critically, to stay healthy, to be aware of themselves and their environments around them, things will change. And so if you have a place for kids to go and learn and play and jump freely with each other across town, I think it will do fantastic things for our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. The last person I have signed up is Alex. So if there's anybody who didn't get a chance to sign up but does wish to speak, if you could please line up here and we'll each take turns. But remember, please state your name when you come to the podium. Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, hi, I'm Alex. I have kind of a cold. I want to say I'm really impressed with how poised everyone has been coming up to speak. I'm like really nervous. So yeah, my name is Alex Zeiler. I live in the Happy Valley neighborhood. I have 10 roommates. We're all young professionals. I'm still a student. And I'm really grateful for this house because it provides affordable housing and a community. I'm a student of urban planning and sustainable development at Western, and I fully support the new zoning of ADUs without owner occupancy in single-family neighborhoods. Bellingham demographics are growing and diversifying, and it seems short-sighted to believe it beneficial for the greater community to preserve homogeneity and low density of single-family neighborhoods. The idea that renters would not contribute to community values because they cannot buy into the neighborhood makes harmful assumptions about renters and anyone who does not currently have the resources to be a homeowner. Socioeconomic spatial segregation can be seen in our elementary schools. 85% of Alderwood Elementary students are receiving free or reduced lunch, and they're 67% at Birchwood, compared to 20% at Columbia Elementary and 22% at Lowell. Between 2014 and 2016, approximately 50% of the new housing growth in Bellingham was occurring in the north and northeast portions of the city. The comprehensive plan has recently defined equitable neighborhoods as neighborhoods equitably sharing the benefits of growth and change, specifying that no neighborhood is overburdened. With Bellingham's projected growth, these socio-spatial inequities will only increase as new low to middle income renters are kept out of flourishing central neighborhoods. Homeowners need to realize the potential of ADUs in making Bellingham a more equitable, diverse, dense community rather than contributing to the harmful impacts of exclusionary zoning, like increased environmental impacts from outward development, unequitable access to resources, and segregation. Furthermore, I think that the infill toolkit addresses issues of density. I think that it should be applied to all residential zoning, including single-family zoning, and I think we could go further for providing affordable housing by following models from cities like Burlington, Vermont, and Berkeley, California. 2 ordinances. The first could be a new residential rental units. They would need to either reserve a portion of their units for low-income housing or pay a mitigation fee that would go into the affordable housing funds for the city. And second, especially pertinent with the talk of urban villages, commercial development would need to pay a mitigation fee proportional to the size of their development that would go towards affordable housing in the surrounding areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
I think that's great that the young people are coming and speaking, and it's always good to get a new and good perspective on things. That said,
Could you please state your name for the record?
I'm Nikki
Thank you.
Bailey from the Seaholm neighborhood, and I am coming from an older neighborhood, and I do at this point want to just state that H18 does need to be removed. Nobody knows anything about that, and it completely contradicts the other set of policies that were set up previously in the comp plan. Owner-occupied ADUs, attached ADUs, and no detached ADUs. And I think that's all I needed to say. So thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Hi, my name is Mark Schramer, 2114 Knox Avenue in the Happy Valley neighborhood. I just want to echo some of the things that Kelly had to say earlier. Basically, I'm just very grateful that I've had a chance to raise my family in Bellingham, that I've had a chance to purchase the home. when it was affordable. And I've got kids and grandkids here, pretty much sure that they won't be able to have the same experience that I have, which saddens me. I love Bellingham deeply. I see it changing. The only thing I can say, I won't go into any details about the comp plan, but just as you make your decision on your comp plan, how can we preserve Bellingham to be the city that we all love, that we've known to love, how can we keep it from changing so drastically that it's not recognizable anymore? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. You can bring that mic closer down to you. Yeah, you can. Yeah, I'm not very tall either. It can adjust.
I know. My name's Carla Stellwagen. I'm from the Seahome neighborhood. I'm the vice president on the Seahome board. I'm on the Arboretum board and a few other boards too, but I'm not specifically representing them. Today I'm here to talk about water. I'd like to mention an important date, 1850. What happened in 1850? It was the end of the Little Ice Age. Since that time, we have seen the water flow and the glaciers decrease significantly. I don't hear talk about the natural resources that we need to support this enormous number of people coming to the area, the 300,000. Now, this is something that the nation as a whole faces. The aquifers are drying in the central of the country. You know, we know everything. It's a great crisis. But a few statistics. Since 1959, the water coming out of the North Cascades flowing into the Skagit River has had a 24% decrease up to 2013. That's a lot of less water flowing. In the past 100 years, the North Cascades have lost 50% of their glacier-covered area. The Olympics have lost 52%. Mount Adams, 49%. Mount Baker, 30%, Mount Rainier, 22%. In the Northwest, we store our water in ice and snow for those times when it's not pouring rain on us, which doesn't happen all the time. And we have great uncertainty as the environment warms and changes. It's something to think about.
Thank you, Carla.
Hello, I'm Tom Scott. I live in the 1400 block of Grant Street. York neighborhood area, or York neighborhood, period. I've got a number of topics. Number one, I'll say I'm not a fan of carnival games. Usually the player is slotted to lose. And I think sometimes we kind of get into that game with planning at times. And H18 seems to be an illustration of that, where we're playing whack-a-mole. It just kind of keeps coming back. We change the name, we wait a little while, reschedule it, and you get a lot of fatigue from a lot of the citizens in that regard. That doesn't mean we're not going to revisit things, obviously, but I think we need to play the game a little better and get away from being a carnival game. For that reason, I think H18 at this point is either unvetted or another game of whack-a-mole, and it's not ready for prime time. It needs to be cut at this point. Let's see. Single-family demand. It was kind of interesting between some of the folks in the the industry and the general public. There was some common ground in a few areas, and one of them had to do with single-family demand. And the first gentleman in his figure 12, I think it was, showed that the demand was actually pretty flat. So if we get rid of single-family in Bellingham, and it's broad strokes statement, but let's just say we do that, what's going to happen to the demand? It just goes out to Whatcom County. So we have to look at the outcomes and the results of our decisions in terms of, are we really going to get the outcome we're looking for? If we get rid of it here, then the very people that you're saying are now, quote unquote, homogenous or segregated in Bellingham, they're just basically going to go someplace else, like out to the county. They're going to buy up farms that are maybe not as strong anymore, get the cheap land that way, maybe subdivide it, end up in single family. Not exactly what we're aiming for. Another recurring commonality between both sides, if you will, and in this case, I kind of think we're on the same side, obviously, as a result. We don't know what our stinking inventory is. We keep talking about ADUs this way or that way, and we should increase, and we should do this or that, but we don't know how many we've got. We don't even have a clue. I remember a long time ago that we used to say that we had 23 in the city when every neighborhood, well, most of the big neighborhoods that were really active were always saying, I got that many within a few blocks of me. I know that in our neighborhood, I've heard differing numbers. It's either we have 2 ADUs or 4 ADUs. Obviously, those are the ones that are registered properly or so forth. But I've got 5 in my own block in the alleyway, all detached. I don't believe a single one of them is registered. So obviously, our inventory is wrong. We've got to get that right before we do any planning based on incomplete or just complete incorrect information. I think that's about it. Oh, H20. That sounds like code for trash single-family neighborhoods. Yeah, please get rid of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Ralph?
My name is Ralph Black, 4233 Foothills. I wasn't going to speak tonight. I was actually just going to listen, but I thought, well, I can never not just speak. So I wanted to have just a couple of quick comments. Number one is, as you know, I've been building homes in this city for close to 30 years. I've built hundreds and hundreds of homes in the city. I've sold them from $99,000 up to $1 million. And I've seen comprehensive plans come and comprehensive plans go over the years that I've been doing this. And I want to tell you just a quick little story and how it relates, and then we'll go on. One of the most common questions I have on new families coming to buy homes from us. Nice young family sits down, we lay out their home, we lay them the price, and they say, well, what can we cut out? We're $30,000 short, what can we cut out? And I always tell them, there's no one $30,000 item I can cut out of your house. It's going to be a bunch of $500 items and $250 items and $300 items to try to get the home down to a price point you want. Same thing has to do with the housing stock in Bellingham and what's happening with availability and price. It's not just the comp plan. You need to look at your subdivision ordinance. You need to look at public works. You need to look at all the facets that interrelate to the housing stock and that in and of themselves are driving both the availability of housing stock down and the price of housing stock up. And there isn't one big fix in each area, but there's a bunch of little fixes that each area needs to have to bring this housing stock price down and to bring the volume of housing stock up. One little simple example is we were having some conversations with staff about utilizing the infill toolkit, and we were looking at it and talking about it. And my son, who's new to the business, made a great comment and said, well, it's the infill toolkit, it's not the greenfield toolkit. And that's true. We spend a lot of time and energy talking about existing neighborhoods and what we need to do to try to preserve them and how do we increase density. We don't spend a lot of time talking about the greenfield areas of Bellingham and how to utilize them to their fullest potential. A lot of what we have in code right now doesn't utilize those areas. And so I encourage you as you go through this process, especially looking at subdivision ordinances, public works, all these other areas you're going to look at, that you keep this guidance over top of you that you've got to get a way to get these housing stocks up and these prices down. Thanks.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak for public comment? Come on down. Please do. If you're wondering, should I? Do it. This is your opportunity. And just state your name. Thank you.
Hi there, my name's Galen. I live at 1106 West Holly Street, and I am the new Western Washington University Associated Students Local Issues Coordinator, but today I'm just speaking as an individual and not on behalf of the Associated Students. I'd like to support all the objectives and the comprehensive plan that further housing affordability in Bellingham. Particularly, I'd like to support policy H20 inclusionary zoning program as a means of increasing affordable housing. My brother lives in Seattle, Washington, that definitely has a housing problem, and he is able to live there through the inclusionary zoning program. He's able to afford a studio there, even though he has a very low income. So I think that's kind of the direction that we need to be going, making sure that there's more affordable housing. There's also an analogy that I'd like to share that I've heard for thinking about housing. If housing is something that everybody needs, like bread, you wouldn't stop baking bread if people need bread, and you wouldn't give everybody a tiny piece of bread or something. What we need to do is bake more bread for people, and that means increasing the housing stock. And in this situation, if we don't want to have endless sprawl, that means increasing density. So I think there's no way around that, and we need to increase density. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Galen. Anyone else? Come on down. Okay, after this is going to be last call, so if you do want to speak, if you could line up here, that would be terrific. Go ahead.
My name is Cameron Jennings. I have a few disorganized thoughts that I jotted down. First, I'd like to just oppose the addition of the infill toolkit to single-family zoning. That just seems kind of preposterous to me, to allow triplexes in single-family zones. Not sure what the idea is there. Also, I'd like to speak about ADUs. Excuse me. The owner occupancy requirement. It's an issue that I'm confused that there's opposition to it. The only argument that I've heard is that allowing non-owner occupied ADUs would spur development, so they would create more of them, which is probably true, but I think that there are a lot of downsides to that, and it would change neighborhood character a lot. I think that we can work to incentivize the creation of ADUs through, I don't know, planning. I was looking over some documents that Councilwoman Barker sent, and Santa Cruz has a program where they have pre-approved plans for ADUs, and they have several other. I don't recall all the means that they use to incentivize them, but they maintained owner occupancy as a requirement, and they were still able to increase the ADU stock. And I do think that accurately inventorying them is a prerequisite to all this, but I don't understand the notion that it's somehow exclusionary to want owner occupancy as opposed to the homes being owned by investors or landlords that don't necessarily care about the neighborhoods. I understand that maybe they would be produced quicker or there'd be more of them, but they wouldn't be as nice, and the houses wouldn't be as nice. So I just think that we need to find a middle way there. Yeah.
Thank you, Cameron. Anyone else? Okay, anyone else? Could you please line up? If not, I'm going to call public comment after this.
My name's Sean Wheeler from the York neighborhood. I'm concerned with the contempt and disdain that you, Pinky, have consistently shown towards citizens. It's been pretty abhorrent. Your move tonight was flabbergasting, to say the least. I think the overarching concern is that the citizens who currently occupy and reside in neighborhoods, their inputs should be placed above those of developers and moneyed interests. There's been a lot of talk about a lack of affordability. The realtor who had the hairdresser daughter who couldn't afford anything, I'd implore him to lean on his colleagues, because significant portions of the affordable housing stock in our community have been consistently purchased the last couple years to be illegally converted into rooming houses, flaunting our zoning regulations. At $500 a bedroom, you can buy a house that would otherwise go to a blue-collar, working-class, or low-income person, illegally subdivide it, and make a tidy little profit. That's crippling neighborhoods like the York neighborhood, Seahome neighborhood. Bellingham has a home ownership rate lower than Detroit, Michigan. We've got a number of important issues coming up on the November ballot, the EMS levy, Parks levy, so on and so forth. As home ownership rates fall, civic engagement falls. Issues like that don't get the due respect and the funding that they so desperately need. So I think it's incumbent upon the City Council to provide the political will to enforce the existing zoning regulations. I think that more than anything will directly attack the affordable housing crisis we're so mired in. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, last call, going once, twice, 3 times. So I just wanted to thank everyone for holding their decorum. And I want to acknowledge that there is a lot of common ground. And one of the things that we all care about and we're passionate about is Bellingham. And that's why we're all here tonight. So just know that everybody up here cares as much about this city and is very, very open to hearing all the things that we need to do as a city to make this work. So thank you very much for this evening. And I don't know if staff, did you have some additional comments? If not, then I'm going to turn to council.
Just a clarification, if I might, council is closing the oral portion of testimony but keeping the written record open through Friday. Is that correct?
That is correct. So just to reiterate that, oral ends this evening. All written comment we will receive till October 20th. And just to give everyone a reminder, the next update will be October 24th, which is our next Monday. We'll have a committee of the whole work session. And then on November 7th, we will have committee of the whole work session for the potential adoption of the 2016 comprehensive plan. And I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. I'm very serious when I say that I'm willing to listen to everyone on these issues, and I'll make time for it. I'd just like to say that there were two policies, H18 and H20, which brought a lot of confusion. I know what the Community Solutions Work Group is, but it's clear members of the public do not. We need to, I hope, talk about that. And I know what inclusionary zoning means. It's kind of a technical definition. It's clear the public does not. So we need to clarify, I think, both those two policies before we discuss them any further.
Anything else? I just wanted to add one additional comment, because I did want to apologize to the City Council, to my peers here. I did not realize, because we had no precedent before where someone just forgave their time in public comment, that I thought that that's all I had to do. I checked with staff, I checked with executive, so I apologize that I did not inform you that this was going to happen. I didn't realize that that was something that I had to do. So just so you are aware, that's not what we did before, so I just went with the same precedents that we have done before. So I just wanted to acknowledge your concerns and say that to you, and also to the public that I was just following the previous policy. If there is anything else, if not, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Rick?
I was just pointed out, just to clarify,
Yeah.
It's Thursday the 20th at 5 o'clock is the close of acceptance for written testimony.
Okay, everybody got that? Thursday, October 20th, 5 p.m. is the close of written comment. All right, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are adjourned.